The hall of the Galactic Council stretched like an endless cathedral of stars, suspended high above a blue-white sun at the heart of the galaxy. The chamber shimmered with walls made of light, and within it thousands of alien delegates sat in curved tiers that rose like mountains of glass. Each species had its own pod, its own banners and insignias, all gathered under one purpose, the law of the galaxy. For 1,000 years, this hall had judged wars, ended empires, and punished worlds that defied the accord. But never before had humanity stood here. 3 human delegates stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by a floating ring of drones scanning their every movement. Ambassador Leona Ward stood at the front, tall and still, her eyes calm despite the hundreds of alien eyes fixed upon her. Behind her stood Commander Elias Karan, in his dark Navy uniform, and Dr. Mara Vale, a scientist whose every motion was being studied by telepathic observers from distant worlds. The Council's Grand Speaker, a towering insectoid creature named Karth Thule, raised his many arms for silence. All representatives of the Galactic Accord, you now bear witness, his voice boomed across the chamber, echoing through the light-filled dome. The species known as humans of the planet Earth stand accused of violating Article 9, unregistered expansion, and Article 12, unregulated weapon research. They have defied the laws that bind our civilizations in peace. The question before us today is simple. Will they submit, or will they face judgment? The air trembled with sound. Some species clicked and hissed. Others growled or sang in harmonic tones. The chamber pulsed with light as their debate began. Ambassador Ward did not speak at first. She simply watched the chaos unfold. To her left, the representatives of the Trisin Collective, massive creatures of molten glass, demanded sanctions. To her right, the Vora Coalition wanted humanity expelled. The only quiet group was the Thay Union, a race of translucent beings known for their logic. They watched humanity with cold fascination as though studying a dangerous experiment. Finally, the Grand Speaker turned his gaze to her. You will speak, human. You will answer the charges. Leona stepped forward. With respect, Grand Speaker, we do not deny our expansion. We do not deny our research, but we deny your right to judge us for them. The words hit the chamber like a blade through glass. Every translator drone paused for half a second before transmitting the statement. Then the uproar began. Voices clashed like storms. The Grand Speaker slammed his clawed hand down and the sound boomed like thunder. You dare deny the Council? This body represents over 9,000 civilizations. We are the law. Leona met his glare without fear. Law built on fear is not justice. You call it peace, but it is only obedience. You fear progress you can't control. A sudden hush fell over the chamber. Even the air seemed to grow still. Commander Karan glanced at the ambassador, saying nothing. He knew the words were deliberate. Every sentence had been rehearsed, every silence calculated. The humans were not here to beg. They were here to end something. Dr. Vale stepped forward and projected an image into the air. A map appeared, a holographic display of human colonies across a dozen star systems. This is what you call unregistered expansion, she said. Each world was barren before we arrived. We did not conquer. We built. Karthol leaned forward, his eyes glowing. You built without permission. Leona's voice was quiet, but it carried through the hall. We asked for none when we learned to cross the void. And you never asked permission when you took the stars before us. The chamber erupted again, but this time there was something different in the air, a current of fear. Many of the younger races had long resented the Council's dominance, its centuries of control disguised as unity. Now, in a few measured words, the humans had spoken what others only whispered. The Grand Speaker rose from his seat, towering above them. Then humanity declares itself above the law? Leona didn't flinch. No. Humanity declares that we will no longer serve a law written by those who fear change. The chamber lights dimmed. For a moment, only the faint glow of the central sun illuminated the hall. The silence stretched until it felt like the universe itself had stopped to listen. Then Karan broke it. If this is your peace, he said softly, then we choose something else. A deep hum began to echo through the chamber. Every alien turned as the massive holographic display behind the human delegation flickered to life. It showed Earth, blue, radiant, alive, and then the entire Sol system, wrapped in a shimmering sphere of energy. This is Project Horizon, Dr. Vale said. It's not a weapon. It's a boundary. As of this moment, no vessel may enter or scan human space without authorization. Panic broke across the hall. Dozens of species shouted at once. The council guards took defensive stances. Some accused the humans of activating a galactic threat. Others screamed for immediate military response. The Grand Speaker roared above them. You cannot close your borders from the Accord. You will be isolated. You will fall without trade, without protection, without our fleets. Leona's gaze hardened. We will stand on our own. We always have. A low vibration began beneath their feet. The human shuttle orbiting nearby was powering up. The hum of its engines resonated through the hall like the heartbeat of a storm. Leona raised a hand. You wanted our submission. Instead, you've earned our silence. With that, she turned and walked toward the transport platform. Corin and Vale followed, their steps slow, deliberate. Not one of them looked back. As they reached the edge of the platform, the alien delegates shouted behind them, pleading, demanding, threatening. But Leona did not stop. Tell your people this, she said without turning. The humans have not left the galaxy. We have only stopped asking for permission to exist in it. The platform rose, carrying them toward the transport ring above the chamber. A flash of blue light enveloped them, and in an instant, they were gone. Outside the council station, their ship, the Eos Dawn, drifted into the black sea of space. Its hull gleamed with a faint white glow as it turned toward the distant stars of home. Within minutes, every sensor across the galaxy detected an anomaly. A massive field was forming around the Sol system, bending space itself. No known technology could replicate it. The field pulsed once, and then all contact with human space went silent. In the council chamber, confusion turned to horror. The holographic projection showed the last image received from the edge of human territory. A curtain of light wrapping around the system like a cocoon. The readings made no sense. The energy levels were beyond anything recorded. Karthul stared at the image, his voice trembling for the first time in centuries. They've sealed themselves away. One of the younger delegates whispered, "Why would they do that?" Another answered softly, "Because they can." Far across the void, the Eos Dawn entered the glowing boundary. Leona watched the stars blur into lines of light. Behind her, Corin stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. "They won't understand," he said. "They don't need to," she replied. "We were never meant to stay at that table." The ship vanished into the curtain of light. The transmission cut off, and across thousands of worlds the broadcast ended. The galaxy watched in silence, unsure whether it had just witnessed an act of rebellion or the beginning of something far greater. The Galactic Council chamber was quieter than it had ever been, but the silence did not come from peace. It came from fear. The shimmering hall, once filled with the confident voices of thousands of species, now felt hollow. The massive banners of the Accord hung motionless above the delegates, while the image hovering in the center of the chamber replayed over and over the moment the humans walked out. Every alien eye was fixed on it, unable to understand how one small world had defied the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. On the display, the three human delegates vanished in a burst of light. The moment froze there, mid-fade, casting a faint blue glow across the council floor. Then the feed ended, and the Grand Speaker, a scaled creature named Veldra, struck his staff against the marble dais. "Begin the session," he said, his voice shaking with restrained anger. Representatives from hundreds of species spoke at once. Some called for war. Others pleaded for patience. The humans had vanished behind an energy field that no one could penetrate. For 3 months, probes and scout ships sent toward the Sol system had failed to return. The last transmission from the border had shown something that the galaxy could not explain. Structures the size of moons surrounding Earth's star, moving like clockwork. "They have built something we do not understand," said the envoy from the Glath Dominion, her translucent skin flickering in distress. "We thought humans were primitive. Now it appears they were only pretending." Veldra's claws tapped against the dais. "We gave them a place at our table and they spat in our faces. They must be brought back." The chamber stirred, but the oldest species among them, the Tharn Collective, spoke slowly. "How do you bring back those who no longer wish to be found?" For a long moment no one answered. The Council's greatest fleets had traveled the stars, crushed rebellions, and pacified planets. Yet none dared cross into the shimmering barrier around Sol. The field distorted time and light. Ships entering it never returned. The galaxy waited. Months became years. Trade routes collapsed. Human industries had supplied everything from advanced alloys to genetic medicine. Without their technology, half the galaxy's infrastructure began to fail. Pirates filled the empty trade lanes. Worlds once dependent on Earth's exports turned to scavenging and theft. On one remote colony, a trader named Lyra watched her ship's console flicker to life. An old broadcast was looping again, the final moments of the human delegation's trial. She had seen it 100 times, but each viewing brought new unease. She didn't know why, but she felt the galaxy had made a mistake that day. In orbit above the same world, a Council patrol frigate intercepted a ghost signal. It came from somewhere near the edge of the Sol boundary. The transmission was faint, cracked by static, but one phrase was clear. "We see you. Turn back." When the frigate tried to reply, all communication ceased. 2 hours later, the ship vanished from tracking systems. Its wreckage was never found. News of the disappearance spread quickly. Fear returned to the chamber. The Council's authority began to crumble. Species that had once depended on the Accord started to pull away, declaring independence. Some whispered that the humans had unleashed something, machines or weapons or perhaps an intelligence far greater than their own. A year later, Veldra stood before a smaller assembly. Only half the original council remained. "We cannot allow this to continue," he said. "If humanity will not speak, then we must act. We will form a coalition fleet. We will enter Sol and learn the truth." The decision passed. The council gathered 1,000 ships from 20 different species. The fleet moved toward the border of human space in tight formation, broadcasting peaceful intent. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, as they approached the shimmering barrier, the stars around them began to distort. Space itself seemed to bend. The fleet's sensors picked up strange frequencies, tones that matched no known pattern. It sounded like a low hum, almost like a human voice whispering through static. "Signal is non-hostile," one commander reported, attempting translation. Before he could finish, every screen on the bridge went black. Power systems died in perfect unison. The hum grew louder. On the forward viewports, faint shapes appeared. Massive objects, black against the starlight, gliding without visible propulsion. They were ships, but unlike any ever built. Smooth, silent, their surfaces mirrored the stars. They moved with impossible precision, forming a wall between the fleet and the Sol system. A single transmission came through. A human voice, calm and cold. "You were warned. Leave now." The Council's lead admiral ordered weapons charged, but before the command could be completed, the ships vanished. The fleet systems restarted, and suddenly they found themselves hundreds of light years away, scattered and disoriented. The jump had been instantaneous, but none of their drives had activated. Only one ship made it back to the Council station. Its crew was found in a state of shock. Their captain, barely able to speak, repeated the same words again and again. They never left. They just stopped pretending to be one of us. The recording spread through the galaxy within days. The sight of the black ships became a symbol of fear. The Council tried to dismiss it as propaganda, but the truth was already loose. Civilizations began closing their borders, afraid to draw humanity's attention. Veldra called for another emergency assembly. "We cannot allow their legend to grow. We must find a way to contact them, or the Accord will fall apart." But the Tharn Collective's representative spoke first. "You do not understand what you have created. The humans do not need to fight you. They simply removed themselves from your order. The galaxy depended on them, and now you are watching what happens when they are gone." Veldra slammed his staff down. "We are the Council. We brought peace to 10,000 worlds. We will not bow to one species." "Then you will watch as your peace dies," the Tharn replied. Outside the chamber, riots had begun on dozens of Council worlds. Starports were burning. Food shortages spread as trading convoys vanished. Some said they had seen human drones in deep space, silent orbs that observed and then disappeared. Others claimed that human AIs were manipulating entire markets from the shadows, guiding the collapse without firing a single shot. One night, an unknown signal reached every major communication relay in the galaxy. It came from the edge of Sol space. The message was short. "Do not attempt to enter again. You built your peace on control. We built ours on choice. You cannot control what chooses to walk away." The transmission ended, but the effect was immediate. Worlds began to surrender their membership in the Accord, choosing neutrality. The Council's fleets fractured as species withdrew their ships to defend their own systems. Veldra watched the chaos unfold from his chamber. For the first time, he understood the humans' final words. They had not left in anger. They had left because they knew the galaxy could not survive without dependence. And now that dependence was consuming it from within. In the darkness of his office, Veldra turned toward the great viewport that looked over the core star. "You think you have won," he whispered. "But isolation will destroy you too." Far away beyond the shimmering barrier of light, Earth glowed like a pale jewel in the void. Around it, the vast constructs moved silently. Machines of design far beyond the galaxy's understanding. Within them, humanity watched. The Council did not know it yet, but humanity was not sleeping behind that wall. They were building. They were preparing. And when they returned, it would not be as diplomats at the Council's table. It would be as something else entirely. The galaxy waited in uneasy silence, not knowing that every whisper, every transmission, every orbiting sensor was already being watched by human eyes. The chamber of the Galactic Council glowed in shifting colors, thousands of lights pulsing along the walls as if the building itself were alive. Representatives of 1,000 worlds sat in their floating pods, watching as the massive central display showed the image of Earth surrounded by the shimmering wall of energy. The field had remained unbroken for 5 long years, and not one ship had entered or left it since the humans' departure. At the center of the chamber stood a new human delegation, 2 men and 1 woman, summoned by the Council after months of negotiation through neutral channels. They were the first humans seen beyond the Sol boundary since the Exodus, and the galaxy watched in silence. The Grand Speaker, a creature with crystalline skin that refracted light into colors no human eye could name, leaned forward. "You have returned to the Council's floor. Speak, human. Explain the purpose of your reappearance." The woman stepped forward. Her name was Mara Hale, Earth's new envoy. She wore no armor, no insignia, only a plain gray uniform. Her calm voice echoed across the vast room. "We did not return to seek forgiveness. We came to deliver a message." A low murmur passed through the alien ranks. "Speak your message," the speaker demanded. Mara met his gaze. "The continuum grows. What we began in Sol has reached beyond our system. We no longer require the Council's trade nor its protection, but we do require peace. If you wish to maintain it, you will not cross our borders again." The words spread through the chamber like a wave of cold air. The Council erupted in disbelief. The representative from the Vorin Empire stood, his scaled wings twitching. "You dare issue demands. You vanish for years, block our probes, steal our technology, and now you threaten us?" Mara's expression did not change. "We steal nothing. We create," the Vorin pounded the rail of his pod. "You create walls. You create fear." Another delegate from the Thraxis clans hissed. "The Accord cannot tolerate this arrogance. They abandoned the Council and now they dictate terms to it?" The Grand Speaker's voice silenced them. "Enough. The Council will consider your words, human. Until then, your people will remain under observation." Mara nodded slightly. "Observe all you wish. Just remember, you are being observed as well." Without another word, she and her 2 escorts stepped back into the transport beam and vanished in a pillar of light. The Council chamber remained still long after they were gone. The silence broke when one of the younger delegates whispered, "They don't fear us anymore." That was the beginning. The following weeks were chaos. Dozens of Council worlds demanded action, convinced that humanity's continuum was a growing empire that threatened to swallow their territories. The Council leadership decided to send a fleet, a coalition force, to investigate the human border and prove that the legends of their new power were false. The fleet was enormous. 2,000 ships from 50 different species, armed with the best technology in the known galaxy. They called it Operation Dawnlight. Their mission was simple: enter Sol space, make contact, and if necessary, dismantle the energy field. The galaxy watched the broadcast of their launch. Bright ships like blades of silver cut through the darkness, vanishing into jump corridors aimed toward Earth. For 3 days, the fleet moved in silence. Then, as they reached the edge of the Sol boundary, their sensors began to fail. Space rippled ahead of them. The shimmering field appeared again, stretching across the void like liquid light. The fleet commander, an aged reptilian named Gorin, ordered the first wave forward. When the ships touched the field, every system went dark. Engines, weapons, even life support flickered off for several seconds. Then from the darkness, voices began to echo over their communications. They were human voices, faint and layered, repeating one phrase, "Turn back." Goran ignored the warning. "Push through," he ordered. The ships fired plasma bursts into the field. The light shimmered but held. Then the stars ahead began to twist. Without warning, the field opened and something stepped through. At first, it looked like a shadow against the starlight, long and angular, gliding without propulsion. Then more appeared, hundreds of them, each one larger than a city. Their hulls reflected nothing, absorbing all light around them. No identification codes, no transmissions, no visible weapons. The human fleet had returned. Goran stared at the shapes on his screen. "Identify targets," he demanded. But the sensors read nothing. The ships weren't there, at least not in a way the Council's instruments could detect. Then one of them transmitted. A single voice spoke across all channels, calm and cold. "You were told to turn back." Goran swallowed his fear. "We come in peace. The Council only seeks dialogue." The voice replied, "You come with weapons. You come with lies." The next moment, the lights of every Council ship went out again. Gravity shifted. Crew members screamed as the ships began to drift in strange, slow spirals. When the systems came back online, half the fleet was gone. No explosions, no wreckage, only empty space. "Where are they?" someone shouted. Goran turned to his navigator, whose skin had gone pale. "They're not anywhere. It's like they never existed." A pulse of light rippled through the field again, and the remaining ships were thrown backward, hundreds of light years in an instant. When they stabilized, they found themselves near the galactic rim. Their coordinates scrambled. Only one damaged cruiser made it back to the Council. The few survivors were pale and shaking, their eyes hollow. Their captain, a young alien named Yaron, was brought before the Council to report. "What did you see?" Veldra, the new Grand Speaker, asked. Yaron's voice was a whisper. "They didn't attack. They didn't need to. They showed us things. Things I don't understand. Structures that bend space, cities that float between stars, ships that move without fuel. They've changed. They're not like us anymore." "What do you mean?" Veldra demanded. Yaron looked up, eyes full of fear. "They've evolved. They don't want our worlds. They want the galaxy to leave them alone. But if we don't, if we keep pushing, they will erase us, and we won't even know how." The Council chamber fell silent. Within hours, the footage from Yaron's ship leaked across the galaxy. Billions watched in disbelief as images showed the shadowed human vessels, enormous and silent, moving through the stars like ghosts. The fear that followed was greater than any war. Worlds began to withdraw from the Accord. Trade collapsed. The Council's fleets refused orders, afraid to provoke another human response. Some races began to worship humanity as divine beings. Others prepared weapons and alliances to defend against them. In the chaos, Veldra met privately with his advisors. "We have awakened something we cannot control," he said. "We must find a way to reach them peacefully." But one of his aides, a younger official, shook his head. "They don't want peace. They already have it. They only wanted us gone." Outside the Council station, the stars glittered quietly. Far beyond them, inside the shimmering field, the human continuum watched. From the command spire above Earth, Mara Hale stood before a vast holographic map of the galaxy. Blue lines marked the borders of old alliances, now fading one by one. Commander Vale, her second-in-command, approached. "They sent their fleet." "You were right, they couldn't help themselves." Mara nodded slowly. "And now they've seen enough to understand." "What happens now?" Vale asked. She looked at the stars, her voice calm. "Now the galaxy learns what it means when humans stop asking to be part of their peace." In the void beyond, hundreds of black ships drifted in silence, watching over the boundary of human space. Their engines made no sound, their presence no trace. To the rest of the galaxy, they were ghosts. To humanity, they were guardians. And as the Council fell deeper into division and fear, one truth became clear to all. The humans had not disappeared. They had simply moved beyond the reach of anyone who ever thought they could control them. The silence inside the Galactic Council chamber was suffocating. Thousands of alien eyes glowed from the shadowed galleries above, staring down at the central floor, where a single human delegation stood beneath the towering hollow sigil of the Council. The air shimmered with tension as the chamber lights dimmed, focusing on the speaker's dais where the supreme arbiter of the Council leaned forward, his voice a cold echo through the hall. "Representatives of Earth," he said slowly, "you have been summoned for the final verdict. Your species stands accused of arrogance, manipulation, and defiance against the order of the galaxy." His words hung like a blade, but the humans did not flinch. Ambassador Ryan stood in front of the human table, calm and unreadable, his eyes reflecting the pulsing blue lights of the Council's high chamber. Behind him, Admiral Kale and scientist Dr. Lyra remained silent, their expressions carved from stone. The entire galaxy watched through countless transmission feeds. Billions of beings waited to see the fate of the species that had dared to challenge the norms of galactic diplomacy. Ryan's voice broke the silence. "You summoned us to answer for our choices. So tell me, Supreme Arbiter, which choice do you find more dangerous? Our refusal to bow to you, or your insistence that we must?" The words rippled through the chamber. The representatives of several species shifted uncomfortably. The Arbiter's face hardened. "You misunderstand your position," he said. "Earth's influence is spreading. You use diplomacy not for peace, but for control. You trade technology that unbalances entire sectors. You offer aid that creates loyalty to you, not to the Council." Dr. Lyra's voice was steady. "Perhaps it's not our fault others prefer fairness over fear." The chamber erupted in murmurs. The Arbiter's hand slammed the console, silencing the crowd. "You overstep," he thundered. "You are newcomers to our galaxy's order, and yet you treat the Assembly as your equal. Do you think your small planet gives you the right to dictate to us?" Admiral Kale stepped forward, his tone like a knife's edge. "We think," he said, "that equality should not depend on how long you've sat in that chair." A murmur rolled through the room again, sharper this time. Some alien envoys, those whose worlds had benefited from human trade and defense, looked uneasy. Others, especially those aligned with the Council's core worlds, hissed in outrage. The Supreme Arbiter rose to his full height, his multiple eyes flashing. "Then you admit it. You humans seek to divide us, to tear apart the order that has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Ryan's expression didn't change. "If your order needs chains to survive," he said quietly, "then it deserves to fall." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the back rows, a smaller species delegate muttered something, but it was quickly drowned by the echo of Ryan's words rebounding off the marble and metal walls. Outside the chamber, fleets of hundreds of species orbited the Council's massive station, watching the live feed. Tensions had reached a breaking point. Some saw humanity as a hope, a force that challenged the Council's ancient corruption. Others saw them as a threat, unpredictable, too fast, too bold, too dangerous. Then the Arbiter spoke again, his tone icy. "You leave us no choice. By order of the Galactic Council, Earth's membership is revoked. Effective immediately, all treaties, trade routes, and alliances are nullified. Humanity is to withdraw from all interstellar affairs. Any human vessel that violates this will be destroyed." Gasps and whispers filled the chamber. Ryan didn't move. Kale's eyes flickered once toward Lyra. She gave a small, grim nod. Ryan exhaled slowly and stepped closer to the central table, the holographic insignia of the Council flickering between him and the Arbiter. "You think this will end us," he said quietly. "But you misunderstand humanity again. We don't belong to your order. We don't need your permission to exist among the stars." The Arbiter's tendrils tightened. "You will obey or you will burn." Ryan's gaze locked with his. "We won't burn," he said. "We'll walk away." The chamber erupted into chaos. Alien representatives shouted over each other, some calling for sanctions, others for restraint. But the human delegation turned without another word and walked toward the exit. Each step echoed across the vast marble floor, resonating through the chamber like thunder. Cameras from 1,000 species followed them as the humans reached the threshold. Then Ryan stopped. He looked back, his face calm, but his eyes burning with quiet fury. "You think we needed a seat at your table," he said, "but it was never about the table. It was about what happens when we stand up and leave. The doors closed behind them. The broadcast cut to static. In the corridors outside, the human delegation moved in silence until they reached their transport bay. Kyle broke the silence first. "They think they can isolate us," he said. "They don't understand what that means." Lyra looked up from her datapad, the faint blue glow reflecting off her glasses. "They've underestimated us before," she said softly. "They think we'll beg to come back." Ryan shook his head. "Let them think that. While they watch and argue, we'll move." Back on Earth, the broadcast had already reached every screen. Crowds filled cities and colonies alike. The image of the humans walking out of the council chamber became an instant symbol the moment humanity abandoned the table, but this was not retreat. It was the beginning of something else. Within days, human diplomats began recalling their embassies from alien worlds. Starships withdrew from council space. Trade routes went dark. The galactic economy shuddered. Hundreds of dependent systems panicked as Earth's technology, medicine, and logistics suddenly vanished. The council tried to calm them, promising stability, but stability did not return. Then came the message. Every communications relay across the galaxy received the same encrypted transmission, simple, direct, impossible to ignore. "This is Earth. We will no longer follow your order. We will build our own. Those who wish to stand with us come freely. Those who wish to stand against us know this. We are not your enemies, but we will never again be your subjects." The transmission ended, and in its silence, the galaxy trembled. On the council station, panic spread. Fleets began to move. Old alliances fractured overnight. Species that had quietly admired the humans' independence now faced a choice: side with the ancient council or with the newcomers who had just walked away. Meanwhile, deep beneath Earth's surface, within the command halls of the United Terran Alliance, a new map flickered to life. It did not show borders or trade lines. It showed potential, uncharted systems, unclaimed sectors, and the routes humanity would now take alone. Ryan watched the map from the command balcony. Behind him, Kale and Lyra stood silently. The air was heavy with what they had done, but not with fear, with resolve. "They'll come after us," Kale said quietly. Ryan nodded. "They will. And when they do?" Ryan turned, his expression calm, his voice steady. "Then the galaxy will see why we left the table." Outside, in orbit, fleets of human ships ignited their engines. The light from Earth's homeworld reflected off their hulls like silver fire. Across the galaxy, the ancient powers of the Council began to move. But so did humanity, faster, sharper, and no longer restrained. The galaxy watched, in terror and awe, as the humans began to chart their own course, beyond politics, beyond control, beyond fear. The chamber was darker this time, as though the light itself feared to touch what was unfolding. The Galactic Council had reconvened after months of silence, its vast circular hall filled with tension and unease. Thousands of alien representatives sat in tiered rows, their faces grim and wary. In the center, the holographic emblem of the Council flickered unsteadily, a symbol that once commanded absolute authority, now trembling with uncertainty. The Supreme Arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber, deep and sharp as thunder. "Order will be maintained," he declared, though even his tone betrayed unease. "We have gathered today to discuss the human question again." At that, the murmurs began. The very mention of humans set the entire hall buzzing. Some whispered of chaos in the border systems. Others spoke of trade networks collapsing without Earth's involvement. Still others muttered rumors of a new human alliance, something vast, unseen, but dangerously organized. The Arbiter slammed his clawed hand on the table, silencing them. "Their withdrawal has fractured entire sectors," he growled. "Their absence weakens our structure. This cannot continue." Suddenly the chamber doors opened with a low hum. Every head turned. Through the entrance walked a human delegation, uninvited, unexpected, but unmistakable. 4 figures, dressed in dark formal suits that contrasted against the luminous floor, strode forward in perfect unison. The lead envoy, a man named Commander Elias Ward, stopped at the center platform. He was tall, calm, and unnervingly confident. His expression carried neither fear nor arrogance, only precision. The Arbiter's many eyes narrowed. "You dare return here after your defiance?" Elias looked around the chamber slowly, letting the silence linger. "We didn't come to ask for forgiveness," he said. "We came because the galaxy needs to hear something, one last time." Gasps echoed from the upper tiers. No one ever spoke to the council like this. Not even the most powerful empires. The Arbiter rose from his seat, towering over the platform. "You come without invitation, without authority, and speak as if you still belong to this assembly?" Elias smiled faintly. "We don't belong here," he said. "You made sure of that. But your people, the worlds you rule, they deserve the truth." The Arbiter's voice sharpened. "And what truth would that be?" "That the galaxy doesn't need you anymore," Elias said quietly. The chamber erupted. Alien voices filled the air, overlapping in confusion and anger. The Arbiter slammed the floor again, and silence fell like a hammer. "You overstep, human," he hissed. "Your species walks on the edge of annihilation, yet you boast." Elias's eyes met his without blinking. "You think we're afraid of annihilation? But we've lived with it since we first looked at the stars. Every storm, every war, every threat. We faced it and survived. That's what you still don't understand." The Arbiter leaned forward. "Then enlighten us. What is it that makes your kind so dangerous?" Elias turned, gesturing toward the great holographic display that hung above them. It flickered and changed. The image of the galaxy filled the air, but now it showed movement. Fleets, human fleets. Hundreds of them. They were spreading not toward the Council's core worlds, but outward, beyond mapped space, beyond the borders of known civilization. Elias spoke evenly. "While you argue in these halls, humanity has built something new. Not an empire, not a conquest. A network of worlds that choose cooperation, not control. Freedom, not hierarchy. We call it the Conquered," the council members murmured, some shocked, others curious. The Arbiter's expression twisted into disbelief. "You think such chaos can last? You defy the foundation of order." Elias's tone was steady. "Order built on fear always breaks. But unity built on trust," he paused, looking directly at the Arbiter, "outlives every tyrant." The Arbiter's voice trembled with fury. "You speak as though you are above the law. You walk into this chamber with insolence, spreading rebellion." Elias stepped closer, his voice lowering but growing sharper. "No, we're not spreading rebellion. We're showing the galaxy that your law was never justice." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was absolute, the kind that carried weight. Then in the highest rows of the chamber, a voice called out, not human but alien. A slender representative of the Kural species stood. "My world joined Earth's conquered," she said. "And for the first time in centuries, our people trade freely without fear of sanctions. We will not return to the Council's rule." Her words sent a ripple through the room. Another alien stood, and then another, each one representing worlds that had quietly joined the humans' cause. Some were small colonies, others were major trade hubs. Within minutes, nearly a quarter of the Council's representatives were standing. The Arbiter's voice broke through the chaos. "You would betray us for them? For these humans?" A voice from the back shouted. "They gave us choice. You gave us chains." The chamber dissolved into shouting. Guards rushed to contain the crowd, but the unity of the Council was visibly breaking apart. Elias stood motionless amid the chaos, watching the inevitable unfold. When the Arbiter tried to speak again, his voice was drowned out by the uproar. Entire factions were defecting, denouncing their allegiance to the Council. The once absolute symbol of galactic order was crumbling right before their eyes. Elias raised his hand, his voice cutting through the noise. "Enough." The sound of that single word, spoken calmly, firmly, silenced even the loudest voices. Every representative turned toward him. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had once seen humanity as insignificant. "This was never about war," he said. "It was about respect. You built this council to rule. We build to understand. You demand obedience. We offer choice. That's why the galaxy is changing and you can't stop it." The Arbiter glared down at him, trembling with rage. "You will regret this defiance, human. The Council's fleets will hunt your kind down. You will find no refuge." Elias nodded slowly. "You might find us, but you'll never defeat us, because we don't fight for control, we fight for survival. And every time humanity fights for survival, His eyes locked with the Arbiter's. "We win." He turned and walked toward the exit, his team following silently. The moment they left the chamber, chaos erupted behind them. Security drones flooded in, alarms blared, and the broadcast cut off across the galaxy. But it was too late. The words had already spread. Every world, every colony, every ship that had tuned in had heard the message. The galaxy had seen what humanity stood for. Hours later, on the human flagship orbiting Earth, Elias stood before a vast window, watching the stars. Beside him, Admiral Vale approached quietly. "They'll call it rebellion," she said. Elias nodded. "Let them. History will call it something else." "What?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "The day the galaxy learned what happens when humans walk away." Outside, dozens of human and allied ships formed a massive formation. Fleets of newly joined worlds sent transmissions of allegiance, their banners lighting up across the void. Humanity's new network, the Conquered, was no longer a secret. It was a movement. From the Council's core to the farthest fringe worlds, the galaxy watched in stunned silence as the humans, once dismissed as reckless upstarts, had reshaped the balance of power. In the darkness of space, the human fleet began to move. Engines ignited with soft blue light. The ships turned, not toward war, but toward the unknown, toward new stars and uncharted futures, and across the galaxy, whispers spread like fire. "They walked away," one alien said. "No," another replied quietly. "They didn't walk away. They built something better." The galaxy that once ruled them now watched in silence and fear, realizing too late that humanity's greatest power had never been in its weapons or ships. It was in its will to stand, to adapt, and, when the table no longer served them, to rise and build their own. The stars themselves seemed to flicker brighter that night, as if the universe had taken notice. Humanity had abandoned the table. But they hadn't left the game. They had changed it forever.